We are going to be making a paper collage, and to do this we're going to be using some tools like scissors, a glue stick, and some scrap paper. For this demonstration I'm using a very small piece of paper as my base, just to make this go a little faster, but if you are working at your own pace you can use as large a piece of paper as you want, or a different shape paper. It could be circular, it could be larger rectangle, it could be a square, it can be anything you want really. Something that is important to decide is whether or not you're going to use scissors or tear the paper, and that really depends on what effect you want. Cut paper has a very straight, very crisp edge, and that is terrific for making more geometric shapes or something that you want to have a smooth edge. You would want to use cut paper. You can use cut paper for your entire design if you like, but you don't have to. You can also use torn paper. So a piece of paper that has been torn has a much softer, more organic edge. However, it is harder to control paper with tearing than it is with cutting. So the difference is very clear: a torn edge versus a cut edge. And it really depends on what you're making. If you want something to look really soft and organic, like a fuzzy animal, you might want to use torn paper. If you want it to just look very crisp and clean, you might want to use cut paper. It's really up to you and what your artistic preference is, because you are the artist for your creations. So for this design, I am going to start by creating a nighttime background scene. So I want a nighttime background scene, so I want to use my black paper, and I can use my base paper to help me measure and cut out my background paper. To do that, I'm just simply placing my base paper on top of my black paper, and I am cutting around that shape, being very careful not to cut the actual paper. If you don't want to do this, if you don't want to put your base paper on there, you can certainly get a pencil and trace around it, but just be sure that you're covering up your pencil marks when you go to glue it down. So that is my background paper, and I'm going to put my glue. If you have liquid glue, remember to use little tiny dots so that it doesn't ooze out everywhere. If you are using a glue stick, you want to put the glue as close to the edge of the paper as possible. You don't really need to put the glue in the middle of the paper. It's not really going to make any difference in helping you create your design. And then glue it down. And you may be saying, why didn't I just use a black base? And yes, I could use a black base, but by layering the paper, I'm giving this a little bit of a firmer feel to it, making it a little bit more durable as an artwork. So if I had a really thick black paper for a base, then I could easily have just gone with a black paper base. So for me, I am picturing something that is going to be an image in space. So part of my background is going to have some stars, and I feel like stars, when they're in the sky, they're not necessarily geometric in shape. They're kind of fuzzy and hard to see, so I'm just going to use some torn bits of paper in yellow and white to make my stars. If I did want to use a more geometric shape and I had a hole punch would be really helpful for punching out little tiny circles to use as stars. The tricky thing with these little tiny stars is that you tend to get glue all over your fingers, and you get very sticky when you're gluing small pieces of paper like this. But that's okay. The glue washes off. Now, if you're deciding that you don't want to go with a pure collage technique, you could also use, if you have them, some gel pens or metallic markers. They would show up really great on dark paper to create some stars. I'm also going to make a shooting star. So my shooting star, I am going to use scissors to cut out the shooting star element. And I'm going to do my very best to try to cut out a shooting star shape. And it doesn't have to be a perfect star shape, because really there's no such thing as a perfect star shape. So there's my shooting star. And I can make my collage as simple or as complex as I want, because when it's your work, you're the artist, you can make it however it is that you envision it to be. And that is what's important. It doesn't really matter so much what someone else has done. It's more about what you want. So there's my shooting star. I'm going to create I have this curved piece of paper left over from something, so I'm going to use it to create a edge of a planet. And I'm using my base paper again as a measurement tool so that I cut this paper to fit. But again, if you want to use a pencil to really get that accurate without worrying about cutting your paper, you are welcome to do it that way as well. Whatever works for you. So that is my very simple collage of a shooting star over a planet in space.